methylene blue goes from being a industrial fabric dye to somehow this super fuel to advance human performance. Talk about this.
Yeah, it has a long history to get there, Bert. It's not something that happened overnight. It happened over 130 years, just about.
Wow.
Methylene blue started off in the 1870s as a creation in the textile manufacturing world to make things blue. It was a textile dye, and it would dye blue jeans blue. So back in the 1870s, if you picked up a pair of Levi Strauss jeans, you would have had a pair dyed with methylene blue. And from there, it was at a time where there were no antimicrobials around. There was no antibiotics. So if you had an infection, if your body didn't take care of it, well, goodbye, right? And this is why life expectancy, one of the major reasons why life expectancy at the turn of from the 1800s to the 1900s was around 50 years old, 50. This is hygiene and infection, right? And so methylene blue was one of these compounds that they were testing in the 1870s and 80s. And they realized, like, oh my God, this particular compound, you could give it at very, very high doses to a human. It would kill pathogens, but it wouldn't harm the human host, which was like amazing. And that's why it actually got the term magic bullet at the time, because you could use it for those cases of infection. And so, in fact, in 1897, methylene blue was the first drug registered with the FDA at that time, and specifically for the treatment of malaria. And between about 1897 and 1950s, when penicillin came around, it was the premier antimicrobial, antifungal, antibacterial, even antiviral. Even up into the 1970s and 80s, if you lived in a Soviet bloc country, and you had a throat infection as a child, your mom, probably your mom, would paint the back of your throat with methylene blue because it was a treatment for viral infections. And so we know it is a fantastic antimicrobial, and that's coming back around now, and we can talk about that later. But when penicillin came around, everybody's like, well, this methylene blue stuff, it was cool, but it also makes all of our urine blue, so we don't want to use it anymore, kind of thing. And so it's stopped becoming as utilized after the 1950s. But fun story about World War II, if you were going to the Pacific, if you were fighting Japan on that side of the front, you were taking prophylactic methylene blue to fight on some of the islands there that were more jungles and causing fungal infections. And so they had actually stories and songs about going blue in the loo. So going, blue in the bathroom, right? So it had a very storied history back then. And then after the 1950s, it had a different sort of chapter, epochs, whatever you want to call it, where less involved in infection. We got more interested in how it worked in the brain and how it increased norepinephrine and serotonin and dopamine, some of those neurotransmitters, and also how you could use it in cellular staining. So you could use it and look at a cell under a microscope, and you'd find that methylene blue would concentrate in the part of the cell called the mitochondria. And this is where it gets interesting, right? This is the part of the cell that we have in our body that makes energy. And we have thousands of mitochondria in some cells, and we have very few mitochondria in other cells. We didn't learn it this way. In high school, my daughter, who's 15, learned there was one mitochondria in the cell. But no, actually, your reproductive organs, your eggs and your sperm have the most mitochondria per cell. Your brain, your heart, your liver, your musculoskeletal tissue, that's kind of in the order of operations, but thousands of mitochondria per cell. So it's a huge amount of energy that we need to make in our body, especially in those places, to maintain our function, our capacity. And so what methylene blue does, and now we have a very good understanding of this, especially over the last 20 or 30 years, as it concentrates in the mitochondria and makes our mitochondria work better. It does this by helping with energy production, and it also helps with detoxification too, because when we make energy in our cells, this is not a free ride. It's like having a gasoline powered car. Our cells make ATP, which is our energy currency. We make about 150 pounds of energy ATP every single day. So a huge amount of this. But
Wow.
we not only just make energy, ATP, we make carbon dioxide, water. So we breathe off the carbon dioxide. It goes to the plants. The plants make oxygen. Everybody remembers this, right? The cycle of life, one of the cycles of life. But
Right.
we also make reactive oxygen species, which are these free radicals that are okay in small amounts. These are really important. They help signal our mitochondria, help to sort of sense understanding if they need to make more or less energy. But too many of them can make the system break down. And so Where methylene blue comes in is it more like an electric powered car. It helps with energy production and detoxification at the same time. So it doesn't cause a lot of stress on the system when you're bringing it in and help support the mitochondria. So there's your tour of methylene blue's history in 5 minutes or less, I hope. Something.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
It- and I had done a little bit of research, so I did not know about the Levi story, but I had gotten, like again, like I mentioned, it's this industrial dye that it seems like these doctors or these researchers were like, hey, let's just try anything. And they just threw
Yeah.
this dye in there and they said, oh, look at that. Let's try this, let's try that. So if you were meeting somebody who had never heard of methylene blue, what would you tell them? How do you describe methylene blue?
The short story for most of the people that I work with, and when I describe it, is that methylene blue is a fantastic mitochondrial optimizer at low doses, increasing energy and detoxification. And at high doses, it is a fantastic antimicrobial. And it doesn't work like an antibiotic, where if you take an antibiotic for an infection, it wipes out your gut microbiota. It wipes out all of your gut microbes. That's like a nuclear bomb. It's like Hiroshima for your gut. Where methylene blue comes in, it's much more selective as an antimicrobial. So it doesn't have that same detrimental effect on your microbiota. So in short, mitochondrial optimization and a premier antimicrobial, depending on the dose and the indication.
Okay, so um, again, in my research, I found these guys.
Yes, that's my company. Transcriptions. Yeah, there you go.
That's why you're here, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it comes in these troches,
Yep.
right? And there's like uh
The
I'm
scoring.
getting
Yeah.
another shipment in today, so that's why I'm out.
I have a couple here I can show on
There you
the
go.
yeah to make it so people can see it. But yeah, they look like this, and they're scored. So you can see one of mine's cut there. So they have a scoring marker in the middle. So you can take a quarter, a half, or a full. And the troche is pretty cool because it's designed as a dissolvable lozenge that can be put between your upper cheek and gum. And what's nice about that is that it's very fast acting within about 5 to 10 minutes, and it bypasses digestion. So if you have digestive issues, it bypasses those. And digestion is also slow, right? And in addition, digestion also usually degrades the activity, the availability of certain compounds when they go through that system. That being said, methylene blue is one of the exceptions. And this is a good thing because if you dissolve methylene blue in your mouth,
Right.
well, just like it was dyeing those Levi Strauss jeans, it's going to dye the inside of your mouth blue as well. And so that is not what everybody likes. And I totally understand that. And the good news is that methylene blue is so bioavailable, which means it's so active that you can swallow it and get the same benefits as if you took it in the mouth too. The only difference is that it works faster in the mouth. And so some of my patients with chronic brain fog, chronic infection, with brain fog especially, they seem to do very well with it in the mouth. And the benefit is outweighs the risk in this case of having a blue mouth. We have different ways to mitigate that. You can do hot liquids, you can do matcha specifically, you can do baking soda and things. You can brush your teeth. That's going to help, but it's going to take some time for the blue to go away. I don't know what your experience has been, Bert, or how you've used it, but I typically have people swallow it on an empty stomach and then eat about 20 or 30 minutes later because that kind of like allows the methylene blue to get through the system and metabolize and get into the body faster that way.
Yeah, so I've done both. I've done the
Buckle,
the what do you call it?
buckle.
The
Yes.
buckle.
Yeah.
And then and it does. It paints everything blue and it'll stay blue for a couple, 2 or 3 hours. It's pretty potent. But let me ask you this. You're saying that having it dissolve in your mouth is faster or better? Explain the difference, why one is superior to the other.
Sure. So I'm an internal medicine physician. I've been in practice a long time. And in my world, there are these places called compounding pharmacies. So this is not your CVS or Walgreens. This is your kind of local, typically it's a mom and pop shop. These are not franchised or anything like that, at least not yet. They probably will be. But the compounding pharmacies, they can actually make one-off combinations for patients directly for them, like certain milligram dosage or certain combinations of certain medications and supplements. And so they've been using this thing called the buccal troche for a long time. A buccal troche is designed very specifically to dissolve in the mouth, as I described it, because buccal troches between your upper cheek and gum, there's about 8 layers of mucosa up here. And as a result of that, you get a slow release of the ingredients from the troche into the body. And that's great for most compounds because most compounds will have a significant lack or decrease in bioavailability when they go through your stomach, your small intestine, and then your liver in something called first pass metabolism. So your liver tends to break things down and detoxify things. And so the advantage of a buccal troche, for the most part, is that the ingredients stay more potent. So they're higher, they're more active. They're also, it's going to be faster, right? Because you're dissolving in the mouth directly into the mucosa of your bloodstream. Your mucosa is directly into your bloodstream of your, like the vascular aspect. If anybody's been punched in the mouth, they know your cheek is pretty vascular, for example. And then we also make the troches scored. So you could take a quarter, you can take a half, you can take a full, and kind of find exactly what dose works for you. But the exception, so all of our products actually at Transcriptions are in the buccal troche form. And most of them are much better in the mouth because if we have multiple ingredients in there, if they're really any other ingredient than methylene blue, to be honest, loses bioavailability, loses potency. But pure methylene blue is almost 100% bioavailable, which means that it's the exception where you can swallow it and still get the same systemic full body benefits, but the effects will be slower as compared to if you had dissolved it in the mouth. And that's really the difference. So
Gotcha.
in general, I love the buccal troche. Almost all of our products at Transcriptions I use in the buccal cavity, even one called blue canatine, which is a little bit of methylene blue with caffeine, nicotine, and CBD. And so that combination, because nicotine and caffeine are very fast acting in the mouth, you'll feel focus, productivity, getting into that flow state within about 5 to 10 minutes typically. So even though your mouth will get a little bit blue that way because your mouth will have the methylene blue in there, it's not a lot of methylene blue. So the key is if you're going to do that one and put it in the mouth is that you park it there, you don't move it, okay? And you don't talk while it's in your mouth. Those are the keys to successful keeping it quarantined in one side of your mouth and not, letting it spread to the whole mouth kind of thing.
Gotcha. All right, so I want to come back and talk about the canatine.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But okay, so methylene blue, it's gotten a lot of attention. What uh, what is the difference? Because you mentioned several times the low dosage versus high dosage.
Mhm.
When am I using one versus the other?
The majority of us will be using low doses. That range is around 4 to 8 milligrams to about 25 milligrams. So that's the dose that really supports mitochondrial function, really supports energy and detox. So what are you going to feel? Typically, people that take methylene blue at these doses will feel that their energy is just elevated. It's not stimulated like you're on caffeine or using our blue canatine, for example, which is more stimulating. It's just you feel elevated, like your whole body and your whole day is just higher, like you have a higher capacity and you have more reserve as well. And so you'll feel like you have more energy, more endurance. If you have inflammation, typically those inflammatory symptoms will typically get better. If you're having brain fog or concentration problems, you find your brain is just able to operate at a higher capacity for longer. And so that's the dosing that I use primarily for patients that I work with and also, recommend usually because the crazy statistics out there, Bert, are really, they're daunting, where 94% of US adults have some element of mitochondrial dysfunction. So their mitochondria don't work well, either making energy or tolerating those waste products, the reactive oxygen species that I was talking about before. And so there's a huge spectrum here. If you're somebody with long COVID or fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, an autoimmune condition, you have severe mitochondrial dysfunction. It's just part of the process, unfortunately, and like one of the base levels of why everything is not working very well. But there's also people like that are in their middle ages and their hormones are changing and their testosterone's lower than it was, or their progesterone and estrogen are dropping, and their mitochondria are under a lot of stress as a result of that. And then that causes a lot of challenges with mitochondrial function. And the elephant in the room for all of us these days, Bert, is just what I call the sympathetic spiral of doom, which is this pattern of dun dun dun. Sorry, everybody, but it's not a diagnosis. It's a pattern where so many of us are just stuck in that fight or flight mode all the time. We don't know how to rest or relax anymore, and our culture really just really we reward these kinds of things, reward these kinds of behaviors. And in medical school, for example, my colleagues, my friends and I in medical school had shirts made that said sleep is for quitters, right? Because that's the culture. You'll sleep when you're dead. The hustle.
Right.
I grew up outside of, not in New York City, outside of New York City, but the culture of the city that never sleeps. And then we have all these sort of stresses that we put on ourselves from work to family, relationships, et cetera, that just throw us into this sort of fight or flight thing all the time. And that really does stress our mitochondria a lot. And so the real key here is that if we want to calm down our nervous system and like calm down, which we don't tell people to do, don't tell your wife or partner to calm down, please, everybody. That doesn't work. Believe me, I know this, and I'm sure Bert has experience too. And many of you listening, you want to support their capacity to make energy better. Because
Right.
if you tell somebody to calm down, or you calm them down, because you
Right.
don't tell them to calm down, but you help them calm down with something, right? Um, but they don't have enough support in their energy capacity, they're going to crash. And I've seen this in clinical practice a lot.
Yes. And I think that get your take on this. I think part of the issue is we have now switched from whole foods to processed foods.
Hmm.
And you see, this shocks me. I mean, first of all, you see these toddlers, first of all, they have a phone. Who would give a toddler a phone? But and not only do they have a phone, but you'll see toddlers that are walking around with Starbucks, one of those frappuccinos. And it's like, really? What are you doing? Which begs the questions that not everybody should be a parent or whatever. It's not apparent that everybody should be a parent, right? So I think that the more we consume these horrible foods, these I call them fake foods. Mariel Hemingway, I interviewed her a few years ago. She used to call them noisy foods,
Hmm.
and I thought that was a great adjective. That these processed foods, these highly processed foods, um, are pouring chemicals into our bodies. It's making it harder for our bodies to live, I guess. And we're having more mental issues. And to your point about the grinding type of never sleep mentality, it's very difficult to turn on a TV show and not watch them either consuming tons of caffeine or some kind of energy drink or something. And energy drinks now are some kind of close to I think $2 billion market.
Hmm.
It's crazy, but I think that uh, our government does a poor job of reining in these horrible foods because these companies are smart and they contribute to all these quote lawmakers, right?
Yeah, it's like the pharmacologic food industrial complex. There's some sort of, trifecta here that you're talking about. And what I mean, what a lot of people in my position talk about there is that we have so many calories out there available for us, but so many of them are we actually are malnourished when it comes to our vitamins, our minerals, our actual capacity to do things that our cells need to do, because we're getting empty calories of processed food, inflammatory foods, et cetera. So you have very obese people that are malnourished, that are actually nutrient deficient. So even though they have a huge amount of weight on them, they're in significant deficits of what they actually need. And it's an issue that we've exported across the entire world, unfortunately, here in the United States. And so, we are undernourished, even though we're overfed. And that's the other way that it's often talked about. The problem is that our biology, Bert, is not programmed to be able to deal with these kinds of foods. I mean, this is everything going back to McDonald's hamburgers, right? The
Right.
most beautiful combination of fat, crunch, you know, protein, everything. It's like carbohydrates. It's just this explosion of orgasm in your mouth, right?
Right.
And that's what these companies are trying to do, because if they do that, you turn off your hunger sensors, because this is something that you've never seen in nature. And they've designed in a lab with 50 different chemicals to
Right.
perfectly create this crunch, spice. And look, it's glorious, right? Because
Right.
that's what they're able to leverage is our biology. And so we've been leveraged, we've been hacked, we've been put on this train because of hyperpalatable foods. And this actually started from World War II, where they had to make hyperpalatable foods where they were nutrient dense for soldiers. And then what happened after the war, where they had to sell them to everybody else, right? And that's really what happened with Crisco, for example. Like that's the classic example of industrial chemicals and other things, even seed oils that were used. And like, what do we do with these? So let's feed them to people, like that kind of thing. And so it's a really difficult place to be in as a consumer, because it's very difficult to know what to do. I mean, there's a 1,000 different types of diets, and there's a million different types of books on each of them, right? It's like, what do you follow? What do you do? And it's difficult for people to piece out. So, for me, I always try to go back to the basics. And you kind of mentioned this before, right? Like, and something that we hear a lot, like, what would your grandmother have cooked you back in the 1940s or 50s? Like, that's probably closer to what she should be eating, right? And knowing also that as we get older, these meat suits, avatars, whatever that we wear, they weren't really supposed to be around after about 40 or 50 years of age, because we would have died of starvation, infection, trauma, et cetera. And so there was always people that lived older. There's always the centenarians. There's always people that lived into
Right.
80,
The
100.
exception to the rule.
Always. And they had to, right? Because there always had to be certain people that lived long enough to tell the villagers, like the young people, the continuity of the stories, and et cetera, all those things. But if you want to live a long time, not only do you have to optimize your nutrition and do that, you also have to realize that you're living on borrowed time after about 40 or 50 years of age. And so that you're already at a deficit because the food is not as good as it was 50 or 60 years ago. But then you have to be thinking about, what else am I going to do now? Like, what labs are going to check? Like, you have to really be really on top of it if you want to keep your make and model, not, your Model T off the thing, and you're still trying to use the same tools, that kind of thing.
Right, right. Well, and to your point, look where we're at now, where we can, it is common to replace knees. It's common to, what do you call it? Live so much longer that causes its own issues, because
Right.
hey, I've replaced both my knees. Uh, and whatever, I'm 80, 90, 100 years old, which is great in one sense, but it causes other issues to try to sustain a certain quality of life. And it's sometimes, my point is, sooner or later, it's okay to check out. I mean, again, not to keep picking on our lawmakers, but we have certain lawmakers that, they're you can look at them and you can tell they're just exhausted mentally, physically, spiritually. They're not there anymore.
Right.
They're being wheeled into the Capitol building, and they can barely speak. And it's like, let it go. I mean, if you want to,
Yeah.
either retire out of office or pull the plug on yourself, or, not to be cruel, but at a certain point, it's like anything else, you become less effective.
Yeah.
And so I think that,
Yeah, what I would say that Bert, is that it's not something that you have to just say, okay, that's what it's going to be. There's lots of things that you can do
yes.
to help support your brain, to support your physical capacity. And so, yes, we don't at this point, even though people talk about living to 150 or whatever, there's no indication that's going to happen right now. But can you do something called morbidity compression, which is live as long as you can, as healthy as you can, and then die very quickly? And that's what the goal of health span really is, which is that you live as healthy as you can for as long as you can. And that's really the goal for all of us. You can have an optimized brain in your 80s and 90s, and you can die a couple weeks later after you get like a bad pneumonia or whatever, right? And so like that's kind of what my goal is, at least personally, and also for the patients that I work with, is that it's not set in stone that your brain's going to start deteriorating when you're in your 50s or 60s. It doesn't have to be that way, right? If you optimize your vitamins, your minerals, your nutrients, you optimize your connections and your stress, and you can significantly improve your quality of life. And we know this from people that live those ages around the world and they're vital up until their 80s and 90s in places in Japan and in Italy. And these are your classic blue zones. I don't believe in, there's a lot of political things that have happened because of blue zones over the years, that everybody doesn't need to eat. Nobody should eat meat. Like, that's not true. They all eat meat. Like, nobody should eat bread. No, they all eat bread. Nobody should drink alcohol. No, they all drink alcohol, right? And so It's not about those things. The biggest thing there is connection. The biggest thing is having a community where you have an inclusion, even if you're, in your 80s and 90s, maybe you're going out and, picking a couple vegetables every day and not the whole thing, but you're doing
Right.
something, right? And so the
Yeah, you
biggest
go out for
piece,
long walks and you like you said, connection. You're with a group of people, like-minded people that maybe you're doing some exercise together and you're hanging out together. And I think that does make a huge difference. But I think also I have friends of mine that are gluten sensitive, which again is something that is fairly new for us.
Mhm.
But then when they go to Europe, speaking of bread, they go to Europe and those sensitivities go away. And I think that again, back to our government, bless their heart, because if we have enough money as a business, we can hire the lobbyist that will put our position forward, and so we get away with a little bit more or whatever you want to call that. But they're again back to the processed foods that there are some chemicals in these foods that really should not be interacting with humans. And but again, our government allows it, and some other governments in Europe don't. And I think
Yeah.
that helps.
Yeah. The gluten story is interesting, right? Because there's actually a lot of people will say this where they have bread in Europe and it's no problem compared to living in here in the United States. There's a couple things going on there. I mean, number one, they don't use glyphosate, which is, Roundup here in the United States. They don't use it there. In addition, when you're over there, most of the bread, a lot of it at least, is made by hand or very in small batches. So they're using like 3 ingredients: bread, water, and yeast instead of the 17 that you might find on your loaf at the store. In addition, you're traveling, you're on vacation, your sympathetic nervous system is like, this is great, I'm relaxed. And you're also typically walking and moving a ton more than you would have otherwise when you were in your sedentary home and, going 3 steps from your computer to your kitchen and then back throughout the day. So there's a lot of things at play here, but I think there it's sort of multifactorial, right? So when I talk to patients about this, I really try to throw it into that context. And so, and for everybody, it's a little bit different. But certainly, we didn't have gluten sensitivity 50 years ago, right? And we
Right.
didn't, and other things. And so, I think what it is, it's sort of the way I would describe it, Bert, is it's more of a like a toxic load in totality, where we just have a huge amount of toxicity that we're subject to so much younger now. I have a colleague of mine that calls it everybody having their own bucket size of toxicity that they can handle. Some people have a very small bucket, depending on their genetics and environment, but mostly genetics. And then other people have a large bucket. This is your George Burns, right? Everybody remembers George Burns smoking
Sure.
cigars until he was in 90s, and on stage singing and cracking jokes, right? And so that person, George Burns in this case, had a very large toxic bucket, where somebody else that gets cancer in their 20s, that's not a very big bucket to play with, right? And so a lot of times you don't know this, but we just, in general, most people aren't like George Burns. Most people are like, are having some sort of toxicity manifesting much earlier. And so it's my role as a clinician, and people like me that are in the integrative and health optimization space, to go like, okay, what can we do differently here? Like, how can we change the conversation about not just trying to find, early onset of diseases? How can we
Right.
look to optimize people's health from the ground up and keep them healthy over the long term? And then there's all these other sort of spectrums around that, but that's kind of how I think about it in clinical practice. And, with the product, something like methylene blue, for example, I think about methylene blue as a great bridge for people because it supports mitochondrial function now. And so you want to optimize your diet, your lifestyle, start moving. But if you feel like crap, it's difficult to do that. So if you have a compound, a molecule, let's say we have the alphabet, which has, I think, 26 letters last I checked, A to Z, right? If you're at point A, you feel terrible, right? It's very difficult, right? But if you can get somebody from like letter A to maybe letter HIJ, somewhere around there, using something like methylene blue, then all of a sudden, okay, now I have a little bit of energy, I have a little bit of capacity, I have a little more resilience, my brain fog's a little bit better. Then the motivation to go, okay, maybe I'll take a walk today, or maybe I won't grab that McDonald's drive-through. Maybe I'll go and go have a piece of beef that I cooked myself for 5 minutes on the skillet. Right there, small little things can start changing, and so that's where I see methylene blue having a great potential role. And that's how I use it in clinical practice for the most part. There are other times when people are more optimized. I'll use it for endurance. I'll use it for travel because it's great at supporting people in low oxygen conditions. I use it for people that I feel like they're getting sick because it increases metabolic rate and can, again, at higher doses also is an anti-infective. But that's the context that I think of all of our products at Transcriptions is to as well, Bert. It's not just take this and see you in 2 years. It's not like let's take this now, see how you feel, and let's give you enough reserve, enough capacity so that you can take those next steps and truly, change your course and, move the needle in a slightly different direction than you've been going.
Interesting that you started with uh, that precursor of energy because Tony Robbins, who a lot of people know, when every time he's asked, "How do I reach these? I have these goals. How do I reach them?" His first strategy is you must have energy. And it's such a simple thing, but to your point, if you're tired and you don't want to do anything, you don't want to exercise, you don't want to cook right, you don't want to do any of those things that you need to do. So energy is number one. All right, so you mentioned high doses, and then you just mentioned, somebody might be fighting a cold. So like if all of a sudden I'm catching a cold, would I double my dose?
Good question. So it depends on the severity of the cold, but typically like an average viral infection, I'm usually recommending. So we have our Just Blue, which is 16 milligrams per troche. 2 to 3 of those a day for the first 3 or 4 days would be really helpful. 2 full troches a day, but typically in the morning, maybe twice daily, maybe in the morning, like when you first wake up, and maybe early afternoon. It typically gives more energy, so you don't want to take it too close to bed. Although when you are sick, it doesn't seem to have the same energetic effect. It's more just dealing with inflammation. So we say the max at the Just Blue per day you could take is 4. Usually in somebody that has like an acute acute viral presentation sickness, I usually have them to be take 2 or 3 a day for 3 to 4 days, and it usually really a good job. If it's a more severe infection, and then maybe a higher dose would be necessary. And we do have a practitioner strength of it called Tro Plus Blue, and that's only for practitioners to be able to purchase for their offices or to ship to their patients. But that's one I use in my office as well as for like more severe infections and more severe mitochondrial stress as well. So I think that there's a utility for that to have it and to work with the practitioner when you need a higher dose. But in general, as I mentioned, the majority of people that I work with benefit from anywhere between 8 to 16 milligrams, sometimes up to 25 milligrams, either a day or sometimes twice a day, depending on the patient and the person. You can dose it twice a day, dose it in the morning, like around 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and dose it again maybe around 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon is kind of my common. As I mentioned, if you take it too late in the day, some people will have a hard time sleeping because it gives them more energy. But I have other people that will take it right before they go to bed, and they get the best sleep ever too,
Wow.
because sleep is not death, right? You are metabolically active when you're sleeping. Your brain is functioning, especially during REM sleep or your rapid eye movement sleep. And so that's metabolically intensive. And so as a result of that, some people will take methylene blue before they go to bed and have better REM sleep, for example. But I don't recommend starting it that way. I accidentally gave my wife methylene blue in the evening instead of one of our other products, and she wasn't very happy with me. Because we have methylene blue's blue, and we have another product called Tromune, which is a high strength cordyceps extract called cordycepin, amazing antiviral and antimicrobial, great for prophylaxis to prevent you from getting sick when you travel, or immediately when you feel like you're coming on with something. So my wife and I were in Minnesota, and I had my orange glasses on, so, my blue blockers, and I gave her what I thought was a green troche, but instead of a green one, it was blue. And how did I know? Well, in the morning, she's like, "Was it supposed to make my urine blue, that green troche you gave me?" And I was like, "Sorry," So, and she listens to me for very little already, so that did not give her any votes of confidence in my favor.
Oh my gosh,
But she
yes.
will take, but she will take our Tromune if she's not feeling well. Like I said, the only things that she'll listen to me about, because that particular product is a high strength cordyceps extract, as I mentioned, and it increases deep sleep. That's why was trying to give it to her at night.
Okay.
It's an antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. So I use it at night, and my kids use it. It's like we call it the green stuff in my house. It's a green colored troche, so apple flavored, goes well, and it works really really well for people that don't want to get sick, which is most of us. So
Most of us. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about uh, methylene blue when it comes to, let's say, autoimmune. Does it show any effectiveness there, like with lupus or some of the other autoimmunes?
I would kind of phrase it this way: where when you have one of those conditions, you have severe mitochondrial dysfunction. And so it may not be addressing the cause, if there is a cause of the autoimmune condition, which there often is, but it would be addressing the dysfunction that's happening on the mitochondrial level, which is sort of the base level of how your cells are going to function or not. And so giving some extra support can go a long way at helping you feel better. Will it reverse your autoimmune condition? I don't think so. Maybe sometimes can help with mitigating symptoms, but it's certainly something that could be added as a way to help with energy and detox and decreasing inflammation for sure.
Yeah, because again, back to the whole energy thing that we've been talking about. The
Yeah.
energy is so important.
Yeah.
And if you're if your body is constantly tired because it's fighting this autoimmune, and then again, and depending on where you're at, maybe you're throwing in some, I'll say, questionable dietary things, which adds to that inflammation, then you really need something to give you a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked to a number of my fellow colleagues about what do patients complain about the most? And it goes back and forth as number one, energy, number two, anxiety. And flipping, sometimes it's number one, anxiety, number two, energy, depending on the clinic and depending on where they are. But I've talked to a lot of people. And so these are the number two complaints, number one and two complaints of everybody out there. I want more energy. I don't want to feel as anxious, right? We live in a world where energy is at a premium. And as I mentioned, we're supposed to be making 150 pounds of energy every single day. And where that's going to show up for most of us is in the brain. And I've been thinking about this a lot when you're talking about politics earlier. I think about nuance. We don't like nuance that much
Right.
because it's energy intensive, actually. It takes a lot of brain power to think in the gray, think in the nuance. So
Right.
thinking in black and white, super, super simple, much easier for us to do, takes a lot of less brain energy. So sometimes I think about looking at these pundits and politicians, and they're playing to people with poor energy capacity in their brain, actually, because we want to take the easy way out, the easy route, and go, oh yeah, that's definitely that. That's definitely the issue. It's definitely all because of this or all because of that, right? But it almost never is. There's almost
Right.
always the nuance that we need to play in, and that's not an easy place to be, especially if your brain's not making enough energy. And so, if you want to be able to do that better, that you have to have better brain energy to be able to do that. And certainly, anxiety is a huge piece of this too, where if you're anxious all the time, you're always in that fight or flight state. It's very difficult to heal, to detox, to recover, to sleep. And so if your sleep is screwed, the rest of your life is not going to be awesome. And so one of the places that I always work with people primarily, especially if sleep is a big issue, is their sleep. So, and it's not just about falling asleep immediately. That's not what sleep is all about. It's about the architecture of sleep. Are you going through all your stages of sleep? Are you getting deep sleep? Are you getting the four stages of that? You're getting REM sleep? Are you going cycling back and forth? Because that's what your body does its recalibration. It it's your immune system gets better. Your brain function gets better. Your capacity to balance your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system gets better. So sleep is a big one for people, and so many people can't sleep these days. And that's a place where we really have to start, making a lot more efforts. And sleep doesn't start just when you go to bed either. It starts 3 hours before you go to bed. Really, it really starts in the morning when you wake up, to be honest. But like,
Wait, wait.
I'm trying to be more, I'm trying to be a little bit more gentle for people and say, like, at least start 3 hours before you go to bed, right? And so like your last meal should be about 3 hours before you go to bed. You shouldn't be
Gotcha,
eating,
gotcha.
right? You should be winding your nervous system down 3 hours before bed. You shouldn't be scrolling and doom scrolling on your phone and watching, your favorite person yell at the screen at you before you go to bed, or
Right.
you're the John Wick number 75 before you go to bed or whatever it is. Um, you need to calm down your nervous system, right? And then there's sleep, and then there's little stages, and then there's waking up in the morning. There's it's this whole thing, right? But
Right.
in the end, you always have to keep it simple. I try to, but always remember that everything's connected. So how you wake up in the morning is also affecting how you sleep at night. Okay, so it's all connected in that capacity, and it can be overwhelming, as I mentioned, for people. But we start off with the thing that's the most important to them right now, and then we kind of build from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What's so funny to me too, especially for those of us who have children, we have a routine to get our kids to sleep. And so we know that if I want my child to go to sleep, I got to start turning things off,
Uh huh.
right? And we don't want to stimulate them right before bed. And sometimes we'll even do the reading, bedtime reading, so we can help them relax. As adults, we just throw that right out the window.
I love that analogy, and I haven't used it. I'm going to because that's perfect, Bert. Because are like you have parents there, they're like, "Oh God, it's 7:05. I didn't start my routine with my child. It was supposed to be at 7 o'clock." And but then with them, they're like, "Ah, doom scroll. Good night." You know, I love
Absolutely,
that. I love
absolutely.
that because I have
It's
four, I have 4 kids, and it's like, and none of them are that young anymore. But it's it's perfect. I love that. Thank you for saying.
all right, all right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, look, we have 5 kids, so they're all grown, but still, we had a routine.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, to your point of how you wake up or how you go to sleep, also, is an indication of how you wake up. And so for us, we started this routine. Um, so we got all our kids to bed by 7:30, and that includes the teenagers. And the way we would get them to bed at
The
7:30,
teenagers?
teenagers,
Whoa.
and the way we got them to go to bed at 7:30 is we would wake everybody up by 5.
Okay.
And so that was
Gotcha.
part of the routine. And so it wasn't just to wake them up. Hey, you're up. Great. No, it was we wake up, we have breakfast as a family, we would do meditation as a family, some scripture time, and then we'd go
Beautiful.
play. And so by the end of the week, we have spent more time with our kids playing and doing all this other stuff and making them breakfast versus just, again, inflammatory, crappy food. Uh, that is, again, part of, you know, cereal, I think, is one of those foods that
Hmm. Hmm.
should come with a big black, like they do with cigarettes, a big black warning on it, right?
Yeah,
Don't feed
sure.
this to your kids
Yeah.
if you love them. But anyway,
There's
it's,
cleaner cereals now, but yeah, yeah, overall, I agree with you. I love that. I can't believe you were able to get any teenager to sleep at 7:30, even if they were waking up at 5. I
well,
have to.
you ought to try it. So let me tell you the story. So my oldest child at that time, he's 16. He comes home one day and he goes, Dad, I am the only guy in school that goes to bed at 7:30. I'm 16. I should be able to go to bed whenever I want. I said, okay, but I'm still waking you up at 5.
I had a feeling you were going there.
And so he stayed up one time until like 9:30 or 10. And then of course the next day he's dragging and he's up at 5 and he's, I think he stayed up maybe pretty routinely around till 8, but still he understood it made a big difference in how his day went.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Um,
That's cool.
yeah, and I stole that from somebody else. Like I just thought it was like an awesome thing. So let me ask you this because we've been talking about again methylene blue, how it affects our energy level, and so not to get super duper technical, but just because I'm curious, we take methylene blue, it gets into the mitochondria, and what's happening? Is it just cleaning the mitochondria? Is it just giving it more energy? What's happening at that level?
I think the simplest way to think about it is it's compensating for the dysfunction that's preventing you from making energy efficiently. Typically, we're supposed to take electrons from our fat and the carbohydrates that we eat, peel them off using various intermediates and chemical steps. If you looked at it, my colleague likes to call it spaghetti on the window. There's lots of these pathways that are all integrated and things like that. My colleague, Dr. Ted. But in the end, we're eating those foods, fat and carbohydrates, to take electrons from that food source, bring it into the mitochondria, and make energy from those electrons in a cycle called the electron transport chain and proton pumps and et cetera, et cetera. The problem is that many of us don't do that very well anymore. And the first couple steps on the mitochondria are taking the electrons from the food. Those are the ones that get damaged the most from pesticides, infections, medications we take on a regular basis, things like statins. Not saying everybody shouldn't take a statin, but statins do this.
Right.
Metformin, proton pump inhibitors, birth control pills that nutrient deplete us or women and cause mitochondrial dysfunction, chronic infection, long COVID, EBV, these things. These are all causing a challenge for us to flow electrons through those chains of proteins, the first couple steps. And if you can't do that, the whole system breaks down. And so what methylene blue can do is it can bypass any areas that aren't working very well and allow electrons to flow better. And it can also, at the same time, recycle and regenerate a couple of the parts of those steps on the mitochondria that help the electrons flow better. You can combine also methylene blue with red light therapy. Red light at the nanometer wavelength, about 680 nanometers, so like your red light panels, or you have sunlight as well. So sunlight has red light in it, of course. It has all the spectrum of light, but including red light. And that red light also revs up and donates energy to a part of that chain at the end of it, of those complexes on the mitochondria that are helping you make energy at the same place that methylene blue can do it, and they synergize together. So you take your methylene blue, then 45 minutes or an hour later, you go out in the sunlight or you go in front of your red light panel, you feel this significant mitochondrial bump of energy as a result of that. And so just an example of what we can do here. But in essence, that's what methylene blue is doing on the energy side. And then it also, again, I mentioned in the beginning, works like an electric powered vehicle where there's no exhaust, there's no waste product at the end, because the energy that you're making, methylene blue can go in there and actually neutralize any stress from it. So that's what makes it so great. And the key is really to get low doses, and your sourcing is absolutely vital here when it comes to a gene. And I know you showed a picture of my company Transcriptions. Methylene blue is often contaminated with heavy metals, especially lead, mercury, cadmium, and arsenic. And you don't want methylene blue with those things because that's going to be detrimental to your capacity, your mitochondria, everything else. And so the problem is that a lot of methylene blue on the market is contaminated, even if it says it's pharmaceutical grade. And we've done a lot of testing on other companies out there, especially your top 5 or 10 on Amazon.
Yeah.
Liquid, yeah, the liquids are the worst by far. The liquids have low potency, so if it says it's like 10 milligrams per dropper on the label, it's usually half that, really. So the potency is low, and it's almost always contaminated with heavy metals. In addition, if it says it's U.S. made, it's not. I had a company or somebody reached out to me a little while ago. He's like, "Hey doc, I bought this methylene blue from Amazon. It said it was made in the United States, but it took 3 weeks to get through customs." Oh, and so that is the issue, right? So it became very trendy in 2025. My company was the first company to create a commercial product back in 2020. So we have a lot more knowledge and a lot more clinical, gravitas around here, especially, we are clinicians. I'm a clinician. Dr. Ted on our team, he and I have been collectively practitioners and physicians for like 50 years or something ridiculous now. And so we have a lot of clinical heft behind what we do. And we've had to throw out, even with our quality analysis, quality control process over the year, we've had to throw out thousands of dollars worth of our own product, the raw ingredient, because it didn't meet our specifications. And so it's a big deal. So what companies often do is they'll take a supplement ingredient from another country, bring it into the United States and go, oh, it has a certificate of analysis that comes with it. That must be true, right? But no, right? Not
Right.
oftentimes, I mean, it's not clear how often, but certainly with methylene blue, it can still be contaminated, even if the certificate of analysis doesn't show that. So it's been something that we get all our ingredients in the United States, or we bring them in from Japan and Korea specifically, and we check them, we make sure it's meeting our specifications. Then only then, when we've tested it in the United States with an independent lab, do we then put it in our product into production. And so what you're finding on Amazon is not doing any of those things. And so it's very important to really be aware of that and really trust, with everything you're getting, not only methylene blue, but almost anything. I don't recommend anybody buy any supplement from an Amazon warehouse, meaning that prime shipping that we all know and love, not good for supplements, ladies and gentlemen, because there's tons of counterfeit stuff in those Amazon warehouses and you just don't know it. Even if it looks like the bottle, I wouldn't do it. The only time I recommend at all buying anything on Amazon that's a supplement is if you're buying it from the company that's going to be fulfilling it directly from their warehouse that you trust. We don't sell on Amazon for a number of different reasons, but in essence, watch out what you're getting out because you just don't know. And so we have our quality control is some of the best in the business. Like I really do think that I know we go the extra mile every single time.
And to your point about Amazon, look, Amazon's great for a lot of things. Quality control, not one of them. And
No.
Amazon, because they have literally millions of sellers on there, they don't have the team or the expertise, and they kick people off all the time. And there's bad actors, and most of them are from overseas, and a lot of them are Chinese products. And So to your point, yeah, I'm with you on that. I will only buy an Amazon product when I've done the research, and I'll contact the manufacturer and say, hey, is this your store on Amazon, or and make
Right,
that
right, right. Yeah,
connection.
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
sometimes the products are a little bit cheaper, but also to your point, I'd rather know that I'm getting the real thing, pay a little bit more because you're ingesting it. And so it's crazy to me what people will do because it's a little bit cheaper.
Anything for prime shipping, anything for prime shipping, right?
Well,
So,
and
mm,
again, look, especially nowadays when gas is going up, food grocery prices are going up, rent is still going up. However, we've been able to suppress salaries, so
good work. Yeah.
good work, guys. Absolutely. Oh, let me ask you about this. What is your take on fasting or intermittent fasting?
So I think the main, so to give a little bit of history here, I mean, we've always fasted until recently, right? Humans didn't always have food around. It was abundance sometimes, scarcity most of the time. You had abundant seasons like summer, and you had scarce seasons like winter. So our bodies are primed to be in those kinds of states where we have abundance and when we have the lack of food. However, that's not what you go in when you go to the grocery store every single day. You can buy tropical fruit from some South Pacific country 24/7, 365. That's not exactly what our biology has been programmed for. So, as a result of that, to mimic what it used to be like to not have as much food around, it is actually very essential for us to not eat sometimes. Now, that doesn't mean you have to eat for 3 days. That's a 3 day fast. You can certainly do that. That can be helpful in a lot of ways, and even 5 day fast in some cases can be helpful. But 3 days is usually if you're going a full fast without any food at all. There's also the fasting mimicking diet, which is 5 days. But in essence, I think that most of us need to eat less often. But the as most things go, when intermittent fasting really came on the scene about 7 or 8 years ago, people went to the extremes of it. And I
Sure.
think one meal a day, the OMAD people, I think it's usually not enough food for people, and often they're not getting enough protein. So there's been a bit of a ricochet, rebound, boomerang, whatever you want to call it, where
The pendulum
now
swings from one end to
pendulum.
the other.
Exactly. So now the big emphasis on protein. So getting enough protein intake every day. And I'm a big fan of that. In fact, I think that I dance around not eating too much and also getting enough protein intake for patients. And I think that's a big one. But I think having periodic times when you don't eat is also very good psychologically, actually. It's very helpful to know that your brain will go into fear mode, but reminding yourself that you're not going to die if you skip a meal is good for your psychology, knowing that you don't have this brain of yours is not programmed to help you survive until you're 95. It has helped to help you to survive into the next hour. Where's my food kind of deal. So I think that there's benefits. I know that we know that there's mitochondrial benefits, there's inflammatory benefits to not having as much food sometimes. And I'm not, talking about, going one meal a day forever. I mean, having a smaller window where you eat every day could be helpful depending on the person. Having a day where you just eat once in a 24-hour period can be helpful. I mean, there's lots of different ways to play this, but I think in essence, the key is to get enough protein and enough calories per day, but not eating like every single moment of the day kind of deal. And then
Right.
having good things along the way, of course, and having, good quality food.
Absolutely. It doesn't mean that you cannot have sweets. I think that at least for me, I kind of reward myself, right? And so I have a couple of things that I like that I don't think I'm overindulging in.
Sure.
But
Sure.
bottom line is, hey, if I've done this, then I'm gonna reward myself. Now, uh, back to your point where we have food all over all the time. And what's interesting to me is when you look at some of these labels, it'll tell you, hey, we're basing this information on 2,000 calories a day, which I think for the average person, I want to get your intake on this. I think 2,000 calories may be too much. Uh, Again, depending on their lifestyle. Look, if you're an
Right.
athlete, who was that guy? Michael Phelps, where he's training like whatever, 4 or 5 hours a day, and he's it's consuming 20,000 calories. That's a different level.
Right.
As opposed
Yeah.
to the average person who's sitting in front of a computer and, like you said, they're commuting. A lot of us are commuting from, let's say, the living room to the office right there, just those few steps. I'm thinking 2,000 calories for a lot of people may be too much. What's your take on our caloric intake and stuff like that?
I mean, it's very individualized. I mean, 2,000 calories is an average. And they've done these studies over many years, but it's been a while since they've done them when people were more active in general. So anywhere between 1,600 to 2,000 calories a day is right for most people, depending on their activity level, their metabolic rate. You don't want to go too low either, because that also can shift you in your metabolism and cause more stress as well. And so you have to be a little bit careful. The idea and it's also kind of important, I think, as a corollary to this, is not every calorie is equal, as we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Having good, nutritious, nutrient dense food to get 2,000 calories versus having McDonald's and potato chips all day for 2,000 calories is very different. So you
Right.
have to think about where you're getting your calories from, not just the total amount. So I don't put a lot of stock with my patients typically on the number exactly. I just talk about trying to regain the signals of satiety and also, nutrient dense food. Lead with nutrient dense stuff. Lead with your fiber. Lead with your protein with your meals, and then have your carbohydrates at the end, for example. Typically, that's a better way to go for people as a food ordering kind of deal. So
Yeah.
that's how I think about it. I don't think about it like as an exact number.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's going to be individualized, like I was saying before, depending on what your activity level is. And I think also, um, again, your food choices, because you're right. You can eat a couple of candy bars and you'll hit 2,000 calories, or you can have
Yep.
some nice fish, steak, whatever, and make that last. Um, RFK, RFK Jr. Um, you know, not to hide my discontent over our current administration, but I think RFK is really trying. I think that he's really been going after ingredients and labeling and any thoughts on RFK?
Without getting political here, I think that the main piece that's been really challenging for me to see is that despite a lot of the efforts on the agricultural side and on the food side, on the chemical side, it's been really disappointing in the sense of, like, if you're trying to optimize people so they don't have red dye number 8, but you're allowing glyphosate in the food, it kind of
Right.
drives me crazy. So it's been difficult, right? I think that what I think is most important here, Bert, is that we're having the conversation. We're talking
Yes.
about certain things, and I do think sometimes that some of the issues are they're minutia compared to other things, like talking about various small things like getting dyes out of cereal. It's important, but there's bigger issues at play here, right? Um, I am mostly encouraged by what he's been trying to do. I think that unfortunately, just there's a lot of competing interests, both in his sphere along with others, the farm and agro worlds especially, where they don't have a lot of motivation to go along with what he does, because this is all how they feed the beast, right? And so
Right.
it's but I like that we're having the conversations finally. I like that we're at least discussing these things and saying, okay, well, what is real? What is real food? I mean, is it that everybody should be having as much dairy as he says in the new pyramid? Probably not. Dairy is not the greatest for most people. Protein's important, but dairy, really, I mean, but again, you can't throw the baby out with the proverbial bathwater here. I think that there's positives,
Right.
and the conversation is out there, and so in my world, that's a good thing. And I'm happy for it, whether it's controversial or not. I think a lot of the things that he's talking about are pretty basic. It's like, well, let's get people to be less obese and actually do something about it rather than changing the size of their plate, right? That's interesting, right? But it's not the same thing as like, okay, let's flip things around and let's see what happens. And I think doing those kinds of experiments is cool, and I'm excited for it. I mean, RFK is a big fan of methylene blue, for example. He was one of the guys that
Yes.
got this whole thing to go viral, and I know the person who prescribed it to him as well, or as a recommendation. And so he's been a big proponent of some therapies that I've been a big fan of for a long time, like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and looking at toxicity in our children, and a lot of other things. So I think that there's a lot of great things that are happening. It's hard to sometimes see that out of all the mess that is Washington.
All the chaos.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. We're having this conversation. I also like the fact that uh, he is physically active, or he
Right.
seems to be
He looks
physically
good.
active.
Yeah.
Yeah, he keeps a certain level of fitness. I think that's great because a lot of people in his position don't do that. Um, and to your point about, hey, we got rid of this, but we still have this other stuff. It's an uphill battle because, for example, the glyphosate, the Roundup, that's a huge company. They have lobbyists. They make money by spraying everything with that
Yep.
stuff,
Hmm.
and so there's a lot of pushback against that situation. So it's definitely an uphill battle. All right, let's switch the conversation. I wanted to come back and talk about
Blue Catine. Sure. Yeah.
Canatine.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what's in this? When do I use it?
So the Blue Catine was developed. It's actually the first product we ever made at Transcriptions in 2020. We released it in February of 2020, so right 1 month before the pandemic or so got started. And what we decided was we wanted to give somebody the most focus, the most capacity for productivity possible for about 3 to 5 hours without a downside, without the come down, without the crash that could happen with things like caffeine or prescription stimulants and things like that. And so the combination of methylene blue at a low dose, again, the first commercial product ever with methylene blue was blucanatine, at least for a long time. I saw pictures of pharmaceuticals and other things back in the 1950s when they used to use them all the time. But in the recent past, that our product is the first, combining methylene blue with caffeine, just a little bit of caffeine, a quarter cup of coffee equivalent, a little bit of nicotine, just a small amount, and then CBD as well. And nicotine gets a bad rap for good reason. You know, you don't want to smoke it. You don't want to vape it. It certainly is addicting when you use it that way. And at high doses, over about 5 milligrams per day can be addicting and cause tolerance. But lower doses, they're great for the brain. They improve cognition, memory. They decrease inflammation in the brain as well, which is a big factor and a big reason why we have so many brain issues now is because of brain inflammation. And so nicotine's great at decreasing inflammation, and it also improves the function of a nerve called the vagus nerve, which is outside your body and helps with relaxation. So low doses are key, but it's great. I love nicotine as a compound to use for inflammation. We use it in long COVID patients these days a lot as well. And so I think there's some utility. And in this combination, it's supportive because you have the methylene blue in there, you have the CBD as well, which are really good at protecting the brain at the same time as the caffeine and nicotine are more stimulating.
So nicotine in a small dose is actually healthy for us.
It can be, yeah, exactly, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. As long as you don't smoke it, as long as you don't vape it, and keep the dose low. Yes,
Interesting. Interesting. Uh, okay. That blows me away.
it's gonna take it'll take a minute. I get it. You can sit with it for a second. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah.
I'll have to see. I like
But
that.
I but I
Just sit
get I
there.
get but what happens when I talk about it online? I mean, I get trolled sometimes because like, how dare you say nicotine is helpful? I've been addicted to cigarettes for 40 years and I have lung cancer. And I'm like, yeah, I wasn't talking about that kind of nicotine, right?
I
But
didn't say cigarettes are healthy. I said nicotine.
but I get it. People have a guttural reaction.
Right.
I mean, I learned like many people, like nicotine's the devil, right? It's gonna, you're gonna get addicted. It is an addictive chemical for sure, but if you don't smoke it, you don't vape it, you have a slow release kind of formula. It is, and you keep the dose super low. It is the data is good that it's helpful, right? In the ways that I've described.
Interesting. Speaking of cigarettes, I believe that most of the junk food today is owned by the cigarette companies,
Yeah, that was a pivot they made back in the 1970s and 80s. Yeah, is
which
to yeah.
which is smart on their part, right?
They're great.
Because see,
They're
look,
brilliant.
we
Yeah,
know, first of all, we're so good at marketing that we convinced humans that smoking cigarettes is going to be fun and pleasurable and hip and cool. Let's see what we can do with food because they're the experts at making addictive products. And
exactly. Yeah.
again, and I'm going to be very transparent here. I own stock in a lot of these companies because they know what they're doing. Just from a transparent but yet financial point of view, it's not a bad investment. May not be for everybody, but it just shocked me when I did the research, and sure enough, man, they alcohol, sweets, chips, anything that's on the in a bag on a shelf, they probably own it or have touched it some at one point.
Yeah, they're actually losing a little bit of market share now because of the GLP-1s out, the Wegovy's and Ozempics, because people aren't snacking as much. So
Right.
now the new trend is GLP-1 friendly snacks. Of course, right? So
Of
that's
course.
yeah. They're trying. They'll keep
They're
trying.
trying.
Yeah.
And I imagine a GPL-1 friendly snack is going to be a smaller portion, but at the same price.
And very highly calorically dense. Yes, yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm having so much fun learning that. All right, last but not least, because we've already talked about sleep and how important it is, let's talk about this product.
Troches, yeah. So I was alluding to sleep being such a big piece for so many of us. And with the way Troches was developed is to have 8 ingredients that comprehensively support sleep. People think about melatonin all the time as the way that they're going to get to sleep, but melatonin is a signal, but it's not your only sleep hormone. It's one of many. So in Troches, we use serotonin support, melatonin support, GABA support, adenosine support, and endocannabinoid support. So most people have heard of melatonin. It's your circadian rhythm signal. It helps you time your sleep. It helps with maintenance a little bit. Serotonin is really important because it helps with maintenance of sleep and it also regulates your mood. Then you have the GABA system. GABA is a system that's very unrecognized as a huge lever for sleep. GABA is our primary relaxing neurotransmitter, helps calm down the brain and calms down the firing of the brain. Many patients, many of us, are GABA deficient, meaning that we have higher levels of anxiety, depression, insomnia related to low GABA levels. So what we did in Troches is we combined 2 different ingredients, one called hinokiol from magnolia bark, another one called agrin from a mushroom called the amanita mushroom. It's a psychedelic mushroom, but not like your psilocybin mushrooms. It's not, and the dosing that we're using is very, very low and not psychedelic at all. But it's a very low dose and it works on the GABA receptor. So we use those in combination. Then we also are leveraging the adenosine system. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter, has multiple different functions in the body, but as a neurotransmitter helps you feel sleepy. And so if you drink coffee, coffee blocks your adenosine receptors, giving you more wakefulness. And so what we do is give adenosine directly, and we also give something called cordycepin, which is from another mushroom called the cordyceps mushroom that increases deep sleep. Cordycepin, I mentioned earlier, is also in another one of our product called Tromune at a higher dose because cordycepin is not only increasing deep sleep, it's also antiviral, it's anti-inflammatory, and antioxidant as well. So that's all in there. And then we also have in Troches CBD and CBN, which are non-psychoactive cannabinoids that work on the endocannabinoid systems, our body's sort of balancing system in the body, in the brain as well, to help balance serotonin and GABA and firing, et cetera. So it's the most comprehensive sleep product on the market that I've seen, and it'll help almost everybody because it's so comprehensive and it's very low dose of all the ingredients. So nothing's going to like rock you. It's just low doses of everything and then synergistically working together. And you take it about 30 minutes to an hour before you go to bed, ideally as a troche in the mouth, but you can also swallow it. It's mildly spicy for some people. And so some people can't tolerate it in the mouth. They can just swallow it about 30 minutes to an hour before you go to bed.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Scott, man, it's been a blast having you on the show. I'd love to bring you back and talk more. And if somebody wanted to find out more about your products, where can they find you at?
So you can check us out at troscriptions.com. It's the word troche and the word prescriptions mashed up into troscriptions. And so you can find it at troscriptions.com, on all the socials at Troscriptions. We have a YouTube channel at Troscriptions as well. It's been getting bigger and we have a lot of fun over there. I did a viral video on methylene blue that's been seen 1.5 million times, just answering questions about methylene blue. So you can check that out. I think I look terrible in that video, but it goes well on socials. So you can check it out at troscriptions.com. You can check out our Just Blue, which is our pure methylene blue, our blue canatine, our Troz we talked about, also our Trocom, which is for relaxation and stress reduction. And then our Tromune, which is for immune system activation. Take it at night, it increases deep sleep. I swear by it in my house when I give my wife the right one and not the wrong one, that is, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, check it out at troscriptions.com. And if you're interested in me, you can find me, my name, drscottscherr.com, DRSCOTTSHERR, and also on the socials at Dr. Scott Scherr. And you can, check me out and check the things that we do. And thanks for the time, Bert. This has been fun.
Absolutely. I'm going to put all these links in the show notes, and you guys can reach out to Dr. Scott Schur. Uh, I'm excited about what you guys are doing, and thank you so much for stopping by.
My pleasure. Enjoy the day.
All right, man, we're out. That was good stuff.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me, Bert. What's your lead time in getting these things out?
This will be out next week.
Oh, fast. Nice. Okay.
And then of course, I'll send you links and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you'd like to do any collaborations on any of the socials or any of your channels, let me know. We're happy to do those either on YouTube or on Instagram, or probably those two platforms, I guess, would be the biggest at this
Okay,
point.
absolutely. That sounds great, man.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I'll post it on Insta as well as YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn. The it'll go on all the platforms, but those are the big ones that come to mind. But
Yeah.
yeah,
If you want a discount code for your audience, we can also do
cool.
that too. We can do it two ways. Where either you can sign up for an affiliate account with us, and then you can get a commission on sales, or we can do it where we just give them a straight discount code using like a straight um, discount that they can just
Link.
go to the
Yeah,
website, whichever you choose.
yeah, yeah. So how do I get the affiliate code? You want to?
Yeah. So just want to make sure I have your. Should I send it to Gary or should I send it to you?
Oh, send it to me. I sent you an email this morning, Bert at bertmartinez.com.
Bert, Zoom login here. Gotcha.
Yep.
So Bert, here is the affiliate link. So yeah, let me just get that real quick for you. If I don't do it now,